That's her, the lady in the picture," the little girl cried out, pointing with the trembling finger. The silver spoon slipped from the old Tycoon's hand. Silence, so heavy you could hear the sound of your own heartbeat. Edward Whitmore rose slowly, stumbling as if struck by an invisible bullet. Claire, the dinner guest, froze. She didn't even know there was a photo, or a secret. But Emily, her 6-year-old daughter, did. She knew too much. And in that moment, with a scream that sliced through the night like a blade, she unearthed decades of silence, guilt, and abandonment. In the locked drawer of the study was the truth. In the buried memory of an old man was the daughter he never knew he had. And there, on his knees, tears filling his eyes, Edward whispered, "My God, what did you do?" Helen, if you believe that the truth always finds a way to rise, even through the voice of a child, type truth in the comments. Leave a like and comment 1 if you love stories like this, or 2 if you prefer other kinds of twists. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening, or at least, that's what Mr. Edward Whitmore believed. His mansion, hidden among the hills just outside Nara, was a sanctuary of silence and tradition. It was the kind of place where the furniture seemed to hold stories and the walls whispered secrets. But that night, the retired tycoon chose to break his routine. He invited Claire, a gentle, bright-eyed young woman he had met by chance at a bookstore cafe. She carried that rare blend of intelligence and quiet shyness, and beside her stood little Emily, a girl whose eyes seemed far too perceptive for her age. "Would you join me for dinner tonight?" "I don't know why, but I feel like I need to talk to you," Edward had said, surprising even himself. Claire agreed, not knowing her life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. The table was elegantly set with vintage porcelain and silverware that gleamed beneath the golden candlelight. "Your home feels like something out of a novel," Claire commented. "I must admit, I was surprised by your invitation." Edward gave a soft laugh, the kind that carries an unspoken past, and replied, "Sometimes life nudges us without reason. I believe tonight was one of those times." Emily, who had been quietly sketching in a notebook, looked around the room with curious eyes. The dinner flowed calmly. Fine wine, polite conversation, lingering glances. Nothing seemed out of place. But as in every good story, there's always something lurking beneath the surface. And in that mansion, something long buried was about to rise, without a single word being spoken. It was when the main course arrived that a strange silence settled over the room. Emily dropped her fork. Her eyes were locked onto Claire with an intensity that sent a quiet chill through the air, as if she saw something no one else could. "Daddy," she whispered, her brow furrowed. "That's her, the lady in the picture." The word struck like lightning on a stormy night. Claire froze. Edward knocked over his wineglass, the crash echoing like a prophecy fulfilled. "What did you say, sweetheart?" he asked, barely able to speak, his face drained of color. Emily simply pointed, her little hands trembling. "The picture. In the forbidden room, the study. That's her." Claire looked stunned, her eyes darting between the girl and the broken glass. "You must be mistaken, honey. I've never been here before," she said gently, but Emily shook her head, firm. "I saw the picture. It's black and white. She's wearing a light dress and holding flowers. Just like you." The tension was thick enough to feel. It was as if an invisible thread had suddenly tied everyone in the room together, a thread that was being pulled tight. And among the shattered glass and the echoes of a child's voice, a buried secret began clawing its way back to the surface, scraping at memories Edward had spent a lifetime trying to forget. That night, Edward couldn't sleep. The image of little Emily pointing at Claire, calling her the lady in the photo, wouldn't stop playing in his mind. It was impossible, unthinkable, and yet undeniable. At precisely 3 a.m., he rose from bed, walked down the dim corridor, and stood before a door no one else ever dared touch, his private study. Everything inside was frozen in time. Rows of old books, a worn-out armchair, and a heavy desk with a locked drawer, still untouched. The key still hung behind a faded painting. With trembling hands, he unlocked it, opened the hidden drawer, and there it was. The photograph, faded and yellowed by time, a young woman, a soft smile, a light dress, flowers in her hands. Claire, or rather, someone who looked exactly like her. He held the photo as if it would vanish if he blinked. "Helen," he whispered, breathless. It had been decades since he'd said that name aloud. The last time he saw her was in Florence, a humid afternoon, when she went out for a walk and never returned. No letters, no leads, just silence. He had hired investigators, searched cities, wept in private, and eventually, tired and broken, he buried it all. even the love. But now, with that photograph in his hand and Claire sitting in his dining room, the past was breaking through the wall of denial he had spent a lifetime building. Something far beyond logic was at work. And for the first time in years, Edward Whitmore was truly afraid of what he might discover. The old magnate sat back in his armchair and closed his eyes. The photograph still trembled in his hands, and like an old record suddenly spinning again, memories began to play, uninvited, vivid, unstoppable. Helen, oh, Helen, as alive in his memory as she had been that summer in Florence. She had always been different. She didn't belong to high society, nor did she care for the etiquette of formal dinners. Her laugh echoed through alleyways, and her boldness silenced even the proudest men. "You live like you're afraid of being happy, Edward," she once told him as they strolled hand in hand across the Ponte Vecchio. "And you live like happiness is guaranteed," he'd replied, smiling. But in those final days, something had changed. She touched her belly often, gently, and her eyes grew distant, as if already searching for something far away. And then, she vanished. No explanation. No note, no goodbye. Edward remembered the crushing sensation as if he were being swallowed by a bottomless void. Years passed, decades, in truth, and he never found the courage to tell anyone. Not even his wife, who died never knowing about Florence. He had locked away the pain, along with the photo, as if he could strangle what hurt by denying its existence. But fate has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? Because now, here stood Claire, so much like Helen, it was almost painful to look at her. And Emily. Emily had those same restless eyes. Edward's mind wavered between disbelief and a deep, wordless emotion. What he didn't know was that the answer to Helen's disappearance was closer than any investigation had ever dared to look. It was with a blend of dread and fragile hope that Edward made the suggestion. The words came over an awkward breakfast, chosen with the care of someone walking barefoot over shattered glass. "Claire, I know this sounds insane, but would you be willing to take a DNA test?" She raised her eyebrows, gripping her teacup. What?" she asked, clearly confused. Edward took a deep breath. "I need to know if you're my daughter." The silence that followed felt like a century. Claire looked at him, then at Emily. "My mother never spoke about my father," she murmured. "She always said it was a complicated story from her time in Europe." Edward nodded, eyes brimming with tears. "Helen, Florence, I never stopped searching. From that moment on, there was no going back. They had to know, once and for all." The following days were pure torment. The lab had promised discretion, but time stretched endlessly. When the envelope finally arrived, Edward's hands trembled like a child's on Christmas morning. Except this gift could change everything. He opened it, read it again, and collapsed into his chair. Claire was his daughter, and Emily, his granddaughter. The impossible had been confirmed. Claire entered the room moments later and found him in tears. I'm your father, Claire." She was stunned, speechless. Only tears came. "And you?" he said, turning to Emily with a cracked smile. "You're the most incredible granddaughter a man like me never dared to dream of." But even amidst that overwhelming and miraculous truth, something still hung in the air, something no DNA could explain. In the days that followed the revelation, the mansion seemed to breathe differently. The air was the same, the walls unchanged. But something new hovered, a presence that blended past and present, as if time had paused to give them space. Edward, however, still carried a weight that even Emily's hugs couldn't lift. One quiet afternoon, he sat with Claire in the garden. His voice was low, but steady. "Daughter, may I call you that?" She nodded silently. I failed your mother. I failed you. I should have searched harder, fought louder, screamed to the world if I had to." Claire pressed her lips together. Her eyes were red, but there was kindness behind them. "I grew up with unanswered questions, too. Every time I looked in the mirror, I wondered where my features came from." Edward reached out his trembling hand. "If you want to leave, I'll understand." But Claire took a breath and said something he didn't expect. "I came here not knowing what I was looking for. Now I do, and I won't run from the truth, even if it hurts." It was in that moment, beneath the shade of an old cherry tree, that father and daughter began to stitch together a new story, thread by thread. And Emily, a tiny bridge between the two, ran laughing through the garden, as if she had always belonged there. There were still wounds, yes, and many unanswered questions, but also a beginning. Something fragile, precious, built not on forgetting, but on the courage to face what had been buried. The past still bore scars, but at last, the future had begun to smile. As the months passed, the one silent mansion began to fill with long-forgotten sounds, soft footsteps, spontaneous laughter, the gentle clinking of breakfast dishes. Edward, who had grown used to the echo of solitude in his hallways, now woke each morning to the sound of little Emily running across ancient carpets, while Claire sat reading by the fireplace. It wasn't a fairy tale, far from it, but something stronger had taken root: restoration. The living room, once too formal to feel alive, was now littered with toys, teacups left half full, and conversations that stretched late into the night. One day, Emily tugged on her grandfather's sleeve and asked, "Grandpa, why did you stay away from us for so long?" He swallowed hard. "Because I didn't know you existed, my love. But now that I do, I'll never let you go." Claire began tending the garden. She said she liked watching life grow slowly. Edward, in between cups of tea, began telling stories of the past, not to relive them, but to finally make peace with them. And the photograph, the one that started it all, it was framed and placed in the entrance hall, not as a relic, but as a witness, a reminder that the most powerful reunions often come when we least expect them. That even in the shadows of a painful past, something beautiful can be built, something that doesn't need perfection, only presence. Edward had learned, at last, that family isn't made by blood alone, but by the choices we make. And this time, he chose to stay. Sometimes, what we fear the most to face again is exactly what might heal us. Edward spent a lifetime running from the past, locking away photos, memories, and feelings, as if that could stop the truth from eventually knocking on his door. But time, oh time, always collects its debts. And when it does, it never warns you first. The story you just watched isn't only about blood, inheritance, or fate. It's about courage. Courage to face your own mistakes. Courage to forgive. Courage to start over, even when pain screams louder than hope. So tell me, how many photos have you hidden in the drawer of your soul? How many conversations left unsaid? How many apologies never spoken? How many bonds you swore you'd forgotten, but still carry deep within? Now share with me in the comments, which part of this story touched you the most? Do you believe in reunions that change everything? And if you want to keep diving into real stories that touch the soul and teach powerful life lessons, click on the next video now. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story that, trust me, will speak directly to your heart.